All right, hello. Welcome to the stream. Today, or in this session, I'm going to be doing a Udemy lesson on the Google Certified Associate Cloud Engineer certification.
Says that it is to act.
Oops, let's start at the beginning.
Okay, hello Cloud Gurus, and welcome to this lecture, where I'm not actually going to teach you how to cheat. Well, not really anyway, but I'll get to that in just a bit. So why are you watching this video? Well, for most of you, it's probably just because this was the next video in the list. But for some of you, you jumped here because you were curious about the clickbait title, right? Okay, so what is cheating? Well, Google's dictionary definition says that it is to act dishonestly or unfairly in order to gain an advantage, especially in a game or examination. Now, if you want to cheat yourself out of succeeding with a certification exam, then you'll have to look somewhere else for guidance on that, because I care about you actually succeeding in the real world and not just on a test. But this definition says especially in a game or exam, not only that, so it applies to other situations too, and that's what I want to point out here. Now, acting dishonestly is right off the table, but who decides what qualifies as unfairly in real life? Some people, and you will definitely come across people like this sometimes, they have the misguided belief that you can't really know what you're doing with something unless the way that you've learned that thing is the same as they did. They probably became an expert with that thing through years of formal education or experience, and they think that that's the only way to do it. Now, to be completely honest, I can catch myself feeling the same way about some things every once in a while, but it's wrong. If someone else does that to you, it's called gatekeeping, and if you do it to yourself, it's called imposter syndrome. These are a very real problem in IT.
Actually, let's check that subreddit out. All right.
And we all need to do what we can to fight them. Each one of us has a different journey, and that's okay. Is learning something quickly wrong? Is it unfair to use tools or resources to skill up on something efficiently? I agree that it's good to get experience and learn from your mistakes, but isn't it even better to learn from someone else's mistakes? Well, you're taking this course, so I'm sure you agree with me here. So, on to the reason why I called this lecture what I did then. It all comes back to a document made by Greg Wilson, who is the Director of Developer Relations at Google. He used to call his document GCP Products Described in 4 Words or Less, but he has since renamed it to the Google Cloud Developers Cheat Sheet, which is definitely less of a mouthful. He used to call his document GCP Products Described in 4 Words or Less, but he has since renamed it to the Google Cloud Developers Cheat Sheet, which is definitely less of a mouthful. But it really has nothing to do with actual cheating, of course. A cheat sheet is just something that you can refer to either remind yourself or get a very basic idea about something when you don't have time to research it more fully. So here it is! This is what the Google Cloud cheat sheet looks like. Well, at least at the time when I'm recording this anyway. It does get updated fairly regularly, but you don't need to worry too much about having a slightly older version printed out, say, because it'll only be missing just a few of the very newest services or products. But about that, it really wouldn't be a bad idea at all to actually print out a copy of this cheat sheet, or maybe a couple of copies even, so you can leave them in different places. So you can easily refer to it whenever you read something about a Google Cloud product, or even just as a quick reminder of all the different options you have when you're brainstorming some Google Cloud stuff. Okay, so this is a really important document, so please open it up right now. Yes, right now. Go ahead. Hey, I didn't see you open it up yet. I really mean it. Open it up. Okay, so I was actually tempted to make the rest of this walkthrough just be me talking over a completely blank screen, so that way you'd be forced to follow along on the document you just opened. You did, right? But I thought that might be going just a bit too far. So let's look together at the Google Cloud Developers Cheat Sheet. And for that, I'll see you in the next lecture. Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome. As we go through this lecture, please follow along on your own copy of the Google Cloud Developers Cheat Sheet. So right off the bat, when we look at this cheat sheet, we see that it's divided up into a whole bunch of different categories. We have compute products, storage products, networking products, management tools, developer tools, all sorts of things. And in each section, we have a list of a number of different Google Cloud products. So first off, why are these products and services grouped in this way? Well, okay, fundamentally, the key reason for this organization is because it's what Greg Wilson, who put the original version of this document together, decided to use. He thought it would be useful. But why did he feel that this is a more useful organization than, say, sorting everything alphabetically, or listing them by how recently they've been released? I mean, if you know absolutely nothing about the product, then a full alphabetical list is probably the easiest way to find it. And if you're trying to stay up to date, then maybe you just want to look at the ones that are most recent, right? But that's not what this is for. Each one of the products listed here is like a piece of a puzzle. They fit together, both with each other and with other parts of your system. But they're not quite like the 500-piece puzzle that you might buy at a store and put together to make one exact picture. These are a lot more like Lego bricks. They're building blocks. Now, every one of these blocks has a different shape. They serve different functions. You can think of each one of these sections like a bucket of Lego bricks. Imagine that one of the buckets has a whole bunch of those huge flat sheet pieces, the kind of piece that you use as a foundation for the rest of what you're building. And another bucket might have a whole bunch of tiny and flexible pieces. They're really useful for certain circumstances, but they take forever if you want to build something big out of just those. And most of the other buckets are a bunch of generally useful pieces. In the Lego world, that's like the 2x2s, 2x4s, 2x8s, 1x10s, wheelbases, all sorts of things like that. When you're building something out of blocks, you need to pick a block with the right shape. And in a weird kind of way, these groups are kind of the shapes of the different products. Now I'd like to point out 3 important categories. Without fail, every single system in IT revolves around data flow. It's taking data or information and it's moving it around, processing it, and remembering it. So most systems will require some amount of support for compute, storage, and networking or messaging. But there's more than that. It's not such a clean division. There's actually quite a bit of overlap. An easy example is a database that combines both compute and storage, and in that way really creates quite a valuable category of its own. Sure, it's remembering data, but when you ask it for data, it's also doing processing, filtering all the data down to just the part that you're interested in, and transforming it so that it's in a format that you can use. And in fact, if you have replication set up for your database, then it's also moving the data from one place to another. And some other categories are a little bit less about the shape of the different services and a bit more about the theme. For example, the section called Data and Analytics Products lists a whole bunch of services that you're likely to use together. Kind of like how if you were building with Legos, you might have one bucket that is the space theme, where you have lots of gray pieces and computers that you can use to build spaceships. Those pieces aren't all the same shape, but they go together in a really useful way. Now, continuing on with this Lego analogy, there are 2 specific line items that I want to call out. The first one is in the Management Tools Products section called the Cloud Deployment Manager. The cheat sheet calls this Templated Infrastructure Deployment.
Tools. Wait, so it goes down here and it goes back up here. Wait, are we even in the right place? Management tool products, and here this updated version. This is 2019, while his is 2018. Might be called something else now, or am I not seeing it? Cloud Deployment Manager. Cloud Deployment. Oh, okay, it's right here. So. Cloud Deployment Manager. What does this mean?
Deployment. This product is kind of like buying a box of Lego pieces with instructions to build a particular thing.
It's like buying a set to build a particular thing, as opposed to finding out what you need to put together to build the same thing.
You get all the pieces you need listed in the template, and just pushing a few buttons winds up building the whole thing. But this is your template, and you can change it however you want.
Templates like these are customizable.
Just like with a Lego set, you might combine several things together, you might chop some stuff out, you might swap some pieces out for something else. It's entirely up to you. But the Cloud Deployment Manager is a pretty important thing to understand because of how it fits into everything else. The next thing that I wanted to call out is in the API Platform and Ecosystems section.
Okay, so where are we at? API, Platform, and Ecosystem. Hopefully it is called the same thing here. And it is. All right, I think he's talking about the GCP marketplace.
In particular, the GCP Marketplace is a partner and open source marketplace. This also has sets of pieces all packaged together, but a difference here is that instead of you controlling all of the details and building it yourself, the GCP Marketplace is more about buying completed things that might even all be glued together so that you can't take them apart. I hope that makes sense to you, and if it doesn't, then please let me know. But in any case, let's move on to taking a look at some of the specific ones. And who knows, maybe that'll help it click for you if you didn't get it already anyway. Well, alright, I'll see you in the next lecture. Thanks.
Alright, moving on.
Okay, hello Cloud Gurus, and welcome to this lecture, where we're going to continue our look at the Google Cloud Developer Cheat Sheet. Like before, please try to follow along on your own copy of this document. It's useful for you to get familiar with it yourself. Now, before we jump in, let me reassure you that I am not going to read out and talk about every line on this document. My purpose here is to give you a feel for the different products that Google Cloud offers, and to give you a bit of a heads up on some of the ones that you're going to come across. Truth be told, there are some items on this list that you will never have to deal with in your entire life. Now, I'm not going to be able to list those items because it's going to actually be different for different people. But I want to talk a little bit about the ones that you are likely to deal with and let you know that the text version of this document links out to the documentation for every single one of these products. In fact, most of them have two links. One link goes to the more marketing type, everyone-friendly version of the documentation that describes the product, why you might want to use it, what it does, stuff like that. And the other link goes to the developer documentation, where you can learn all the details that you need to know to be able to use that particular product effectively. But let's start at the top of the list. Compute Engine is described as Virtual Machines Disks Network. This is the most relatable Google Cloud product. Just like computers you might buy from the store, you can run whatever you want on them. Do virtually any
Most relatable product. Wait, where on this? Okay, there it is. Product line.
anything with them, but you rent these ones by the second. Have a huge job? Maybe spin up dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of Compute Engine instances at the same time to get the job done faster. Then stop paying for them when the job's done. This is like the workhorse 2x4 brick of the LEGO world. You can build almost anything with it if you have the time and you're okay with having a few rough edges. But in terms of building systems, this is a relatively small brick where you have to do a lot of work yourself to use it. Cloud Functions, just a little way down, is described as event-driven serverless functions. Cloud Functions is built even finer grained than Compute Engine is. This is by the 10th of a second, but it manages all of the scaling for you automatically. This is Google Cloud's Functions as a Service product, or FaaS, and just like Amazon's Lambda, this is a key building block of serverless systems. With this, instead of running server programs that sit around and wait for clients to connect to them, in Cloud Functions you set up an event, and Google will run the code that you've given it every time that event happens.
Ooh, it's kind of useful to know.
If no events, Google will run the code that you've given it. In Cloud Functions, you set up an event, and Google
Okay. Instead of running server programs that sit around and wait for clients to connect, you would set up an event, and Google will run the code that you've given it every time that event triggers. And if there isn't, and you will be paying for the time that the event isn't running. How about that?
will run the code that you've given it every time that event happens. If no events are happening, you're not paying anything. And if a whole bunch of these events happen all at the same time, then Google just runs your code in parallel, lots of times. But you don't even really have to think about that. Google just does it automatically. Now there are all sorts of events that you can hook up. They could be requests through HTTP,
Except all events pass through HTTP.
Like connections being made from your web page or other microservices or something like that. Or the event could be a new object being uploaded to cloud storage, or a message being sent to Cloud PubSub, or any number of other things really. There are lots of different event types. Now this isn't a perfect comparison, but if we were looking for something in the Lego world that would be like this, maybe it would be like a thin 1x6 brick. You can build lots of things with it, but it's particularly good at connecting all sorts of things together. Now, speaking of cloud storage, just like Cloud Functions, Cloud Storage is also a serverless product, and they work very nicely together. Cloud storage is like the most pure service at its core. It says, give me some data, and I can give it back to you. No fuss, no muss, and incredibly reliable. You never really change any data it holds, but you can give it some new data and tell it to forget about the old stuff. But unless you tell it to, it's really, really good at not losing your data, and it's also amazing at handling however much load you slam it with, without even breaking a sweat. That's why it's described as object storage and serving. Nearline and Coldline are really just versions of cloud storage that are priced and optimized for less frequent data access patterns, so they're perfect for backups. That's why their descriptions are archival occasional access storage and archival rare access storage. Persistent disk is a special kind of storage, and its description gives that away. VM-attached disks. Now the cloud storage product is object storage, but persistent disk is
write this down. So for nearline and coldline products, the pricing models are different. Pricing models differ from cloud storage in a way where the data stored isn't accessed as frequently. So it's probably cheaper.
Block storage instead, so it works much like a hard drive does, and it only connects. Disk is a special kind of storage.
Then we have persistent disk.
And its description gives that away. VM-attached disks. Now the cloud storage product is object storage, but persistent disk is block storage instead, so it works.
Cloud storage is by default object storage, though for persistent this the block storage instead. Cool.
Works much like a hard drive does, and it only connects to compute engine instances.
Should add that note. Only connects to compute engine instances.
In a way, persistent disk is kind of like the Lego pieces with a different kind of connector on the side. It only goes together with compute engine. They were made for each other. You don't usually even think too much about the persistent disks. They're just one aspect of the compute engine instance. But if you've decided to take on the burden of managing data storage yourself, which I don't generally recommend by the way, then you'll get more familiar with this product and some of the cool things that it can do beyond what a normal hard drive could do. Cloud File Store sits between cloud storage and persistent disk, and it is neither object-based nor block-based. Cloud File Store is file-based.
Either object or block-based. It is file-based. And is managed by a NFC server.
Being a managed NFS server, it's a bit more flexible to connect to than persistent disk, and may work better with certain kinds of applications than the object-based cloud storage. Jumping back up a little bit, GKE, or Kubernetes Engine, can help alleviate some of the management burden that you would otherwise have to deal with.
Compute products, Kubernetes Engine. Handles some of the management burden that you would otherwise have to deal
with Compute Engine. GKE will install, run, and manage Kubernetes for you on clusters of Compute Engine instances. But it also reaches out to the networking world and creates things like cloud load balancers, which helps reduce even further the amount of stuff that you would have to do. Now, Cloud TPU is listed in the AI and machine learning section, but it's specialized hardware for machine learning, so it's kind of like a compute engine.
Alright, AI and machine. You know what? Why don't I bring out the PDF and can I just copy it from here? I think that would save some time. Okay, it's here. Specialized hardware for machine learning. So it's kind of like a compute engine instance. This one is for TensorFlow processing.
Engine instance, but this one is purpose-built for TensorFlow processing instead of for general-purpose processing. In fact, that's what TPU stands for, TensorFlow Processing Unit. Now, if you're not familiar with it, TensorFlow is an open-source platform for doing machine learning stuff.
Ooh, okay, I did not know that. TPU stands for Tensor. Okay. TensorFlow Processing Unit. There we go. Which is an open source platform for doing machine learning stuff.
It's quite broadly popular, but it's actually another one of the things that Google originally created and then released as open source. Now, some of the products in the AI and machine learning section are pretty straightforward. Cloud Speech to Text will convert audio to text. Cloud Text to Speech will convert text to audio. Cloud Natural Language is for text parsing and analysis. So you can give it some text, and then it'll tell you both the parts of speech and the emotions that are represented in it, stuff like that. And it'll tell you both the parts of speech and the emotions that Cloud Natural Language.
copying all that down. Just paste that in.
Language is for text parsing and analysis. So you can give it some text, and then it'll tell you both the parts of speech and the emotions that are represented in it, stuff like that. But there's a lot more breadth to the AI and machine learning products. In fact, there's quite a spectrum, where at one end you have the completely automatic, pre-trained machine learning model stuff, like we've just talked about. At the complete opposite end, we have Cloud Machine Learning Engine, which is a
Cloud Machine Learning Engine. Manage platform or machine learning, where it will run TensorFlow for you, or if you want to get even more manual.
a managed platform for machine learning, where it will run TensorFlow for you, or if you want to get even more manual, the Cloud Deep Learning
Deep Learning VM image, like above, but more manual to set up.
VM image is a pre-configured virtual machine for deep learning, so you would run that image as a compute engine instance.
Run this VM image as a compute engine.
In the middle of the spectrum, though, we have the Cloud AutoML products, where the basic machine learning models are set up.
Okay. Cloud AutoML natural language. Oh, you know what? What am I doing? What am I doing? Let me just copy and or snip this and paste it in.
But you can train them on your organization's own set of data, whether those be text documents or images or translations or what have you. The databases section has quite a variety of products. The one that's most likely to be familiar to you is Cloud SQL, which is managed MySQL and PostgreSQL.
Okay. Cloud SQL. SQL. Well, I mean, it says right there, I don't need to write that down. Use so that you don't have to manage the compute engine yourself. The compute engine instance and persistent disk yourself.
Here, instead of having to manage the compute engine instances and persistent disks yourself, and installing MySQL, upgrading it, applying patches, all that good stuff, here, Google can do all of that for you, and can even manage things like read replicas. But not everything fits within a single MySQL instance, and so Cloud Spanner is a horizontally scalable relational database.
All right. Spanner. Because not everything fits within a single SQL instance. So this is the solution for scale. scalable relation database.
This thing is seriously massive scale, and it lets you keep all of the things you love about relational databases while still scaling well beyond what you would ever consider normal for that. But not every situation still needs a relational database, so there are a number of non-relational options too. Cloud Firestore, which incidentally shows up in a couple of sections,
Cloud Firestore.
sections here, since it's also one of the Firebase family of products that shows up in the mobile products section. It's a strongly consistent serverless document database.
Strongly consistent serverless document database. Includes stuff like WebSocket connections for updates, cloud data store that's horizontally scalable,
database, and it has some really cool things built in, like WebSocket connections for updates. But there's also Cloud Data Store, which is a horizontally scalable document
oops,
database. And one of the nice things about Cloud Data Store is that you just pay for what you use. You don't have to provision and manage a certain capacity. But if you do have a more predictable and high volume, then Cloud Bigtable might be a better choice, since it is a petabyte scale, low latency,
Big's table. Data is more predictable. And also higher volume. And this would be a better choice since it is a petabyte byte scale, low latency. Relational. Database.
non-relational database. In the Data and Analytics section, two of the core services that stand out are Cloud Dataflow and
BRB for a second. The girl.
and Cloud Data Proc. Now, Data Proc is managed Spark and Hadoop.
Cloud data flow. So cloud data proc.
So if you're already running Hadoop work somewhere else,
Spark and Hadoop.
Cloud Data Proc could be a good way to move that work onto the Google Cloud. This is for processing large amounts of data, and it uses Compute Engine under the hood, just like Kubernetes Engine does. Cloud Dataflow also processes large amounts of data, but this is newer and better than Cloud Data Proc, and it handles both stream and batch data processing.
For both stream and batch data processing.
The key technology behind Cloud Dataflow is something that Google released as the open source Apache Beam.
Key technology. Cloud data flow. Something that Google released as the open source Apache Beam.
Now, Google Genomics is
Oh my god, there are so many services.
very specialized, and it's only really useful if you're working with that kind of medical data.
Useful for working with medical data.
Comparing this to Lego pieces, this is kind of like a helicopter rotor Lego piece. It's not very general purpose, but it's very useful if you have that particular need. Cloud PubSub is probably the most flexible
Flexible product and all of Google Cloud.
product in all of Google Cloud. This is described as global real-time messaging, and it can be used to connect almost anything to almost anything else. In Cloud PubSub, you create topics.
Oh. And connect something to just about anything else. What?
And then you have one part of your system publish messages to that topic, and another part of your system subscribe to messages.
One part of your system will publish messages, while another would be able to subscribe to it. function creates data and publishes it. And then you might that same data flow out to both Cloud Data Flow and BigQuery. Oh my God.
From that topic. So for example, you might have a cloud function that creates some data and publishes it, and then you might have that same data flow out to both Cloud Data Flow and BigQuery. Now, speaking of BigQuery, some people have described BigQuery as the crown jewel in Google Cloud.
BigQuery. Job. Crown jewel in GCP. Data warehouse slash analytics. BigQuery is serverless in that when you're not using it, you're not paying for it. Serverless.
It is definitely a really important and valuable product. It's described as data warehouse slash analytics, but I think that undersells it quite a lot. BigQuery is serverless in that when you're not using it, you're not paying for it, and then when you slam it with a huge complicated SQL query, it just scales up automatically and handles it without a problem. You can store tons of data in BigQuery and still get incredibly fast responses to your queries. Pretty much everyone loves BigQuery. In the networking section, there are a bunch of different things listed. Virtual Private Cloud, or VPC, is the core. It's the umbrella.
Networking. Virtual Private Cloud. Core product. Umbrella. For software. Oh, SDN. And most other networking services. Okay, off of it.
Umbrella for the software-defined networking, and most of the other networking services hang off of that one. You can use dedicated interconnect to have a dedicated private network connection between that VPC and your
allows you to link your VPC to something else, to an external data center.
your external data center. You can use Cloud NAT.
Not used to connect out from that VPC. region.
That to have network address translation to connect out from that VPC, and you can have cloud load balancing. That deals with multi-region load distribution into that global virtual private cloud network. Cloud load
into that global VPC.
balancing is pretty special, especially when you combine it with the premium network service tier. That can let you have your
network service tiers. Which lets clients all over the world to connect with one IP address. And still have all of those connections made to whatever server that's inside your VPC. VPC that is also closest to them, so physically.
clients who are connecting from all over the world connect to one single IP address and still have all of those connections be made to whatever server inside of your VPC is actually physically closest to them. That means that your clients can have much faster connections, and faster connections makes for happier clients. Oh, and it also handles situations where there isn't something close by to serve that request because it's failed or something like that, and it can just reroute that inside of Google's global network to some server that actually can still handle that request. But this is all transparent to the client, so failovers like that can happen almost instantaneously. Now there are more products here too. Cloud Armor is distributed denial of service protection and a web application firewall. Cloud CDN is a content delivery network that can cache data much closer to where users are physically located. And Cloud DNS lets you take advantage of Google's programmable DNS.
Okay. Cloud CDN. DNS. DNS has 100% time guarantee when your users are connected to the domain address.
DNS serving network, where their domain name system has a 100% uptime guarantee. When your users are connecting to mycoolwebsite.com or whatever it is, you definitely want that name translation to succeed. Otherwise, they won't be able to connect to your service at all. Down in the Management Tools section, Stackdriver is an important family of services. Stackdriver Monitoring is infrastructure and application monitoring, so you can watch metrics of what's going on in your system. Stackdriver Logging is centralized logging, so that all Driver is an important family of services.
All right.
Stackdriver monitoring is infrastructure and application monitoring, so you can watch metrics of what's going
Watch metrics. What's going on in your system stack?
on in your system. Stackdriver logging is centralized logging so that all the different parts of your system, whether they be microservices or just
different parts of your system,
multiple instances, or completely different parts of your system, they can all log to one central place. Centralized logging is really important to running a system, because if you have to go out and try and gather up log information from every individual piece of your system just to make sense of what's been happening, you're going to get so bogged down in that overhead that you won't actually be able to make any progress.
Gather up log.
The identity and security section has a
Identity and security products.
Number of interesting products too. The core ones are Cloud Identity, which, if you're not using G Suite, is where you manage users, devices, and apps, and Cloud IAM, which stands for
G Suite, using this to manage users and devices, apps, and cloud. Identity and access management. The resource. Cloud AIM. Ooh, actually. Chop down. Alright.
for identity and access management is the resource access control part of things. Cloud IAM ties everything together from a security perspective. That's where you define who can do what to which things. Now there's more security related stuff too, like Cloud HSM is the
module. For encryption keys. Inserts. And cloud data loss prevention. API.
The hardware security module service, you can use that to manage your encryption keys and certificates. And the cloud data loss prevention API is actually a machine learning service.
Machine learning service that can classify and redact sensitive data from what you point at.
Service that can classify and redact sensitive data from what you pointed at. Now, I could go on like this all day, but I'm sure you'll be happy to hear that I won't. So feel free to keep reading through some of these on your own and following up on some of the ones that interest you by taking a look at their product overview pages. A lot of these pages are really user-friendly, and some of them even have little demos built in. Well, alright, I hope you found that to be a valuable walk through some of the key products that Google offers to get a feel for how those products could be used to build bigger systems. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. If not, please feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. So I think an important question that I saw in the Q&A is regarding like if everything in this PDF is going to be covered, and I think this person asks it, does this exam cover all these sections? And we need to go over all the sections deeply as part of preparation. Hi, Satish. Matthias has carefully designed the course to cover everything you need to know to pass the exam and also to be effective in a day-to-day role as a Google Cloud engineer. Everything included in the course is relevant to the exam, so I would suggest you definitely complete all the lectures and exercises as well as reading the resources that he refers to as well. Cool. I guess I will interpret that as no, you do not need to know every single line item of this PDF file. With that said, I actually am going to stop here because my dog is kind of getting annoyed at me because she wants her walk. Thank you for watching and have a good night.